Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Rabbi Ayelet Cohen. I'm Dean of the Division of Religious Leadership and the Rabbinical School here at JTS, and I'm so thrilled that we're gathering back together for this very important session, Majority Rights and Equity for Minorities, Assessing the Nation-State Law. This session is generously sponsored by Dr. Annette and Daniel Castle, and we thank them for their profound generosity to JTS. So we have arrived at an extremely important topic, and if we think about the trajectory of the last day and a half, we got to this point after a lot of factors and a lot of changes which we've been witnessing over the last number of years. And it's important to understand both their development and their impact on all of the citizens and residents of Israel. So in June 2018, the Knesset passed a law that had been under discussion for about half a dozen years after intense debate and tremendous opposition by Israel's civil society and pro-democracy sector. In the absence of a constitution, the Knesset has passed a series of quasi-constitutional laws, many of which were anchored in Israel's Declaration of Independence, and some of which can only be changed by a supermajority of the Knesset. These basic laws have a status akin to a constitutional amendment in our system, in the American system. And as such, laws and policies that violate the basic laws are considered to be unconstitutional in the Israeli system, even though it lacks a constitution. So under normal rules, any bill that is to become a basic law has to be reviewed by a constitution committee. But in this case, of this particular basic law, since key members of the Constitutional Committee opposed it, a special committee was formed to circumvent their influence. The basic law, officially called Israel the Nation-State of the Jewish People, familiarly known as the Nation-State Law, among other things, states that the Jewish people's right to self-determination is restricted to the Jewish people in Israel. It also covers the Jewish right of return, the status of Jerusalem, the national flag and other national symbols, the Jewish calendar, Independence Day, Yom HaAtzmaut, and other memorial days, and the status of the Hebrew language. Among other things, it establishes Hebrew as the official language of Israel, and it downgrades Arabic into a language with special status rather than another official language, even though many, many people in Israel's significant Arab minority primarily speak Arabic. The nation-state law passed the Knesset by a relatively narrow margin for such a significant piece of legislation, with 62 in favor and 55 opposed. The impact of this law was tremendous. The passage of the law was seen as a sea change in the long assault on Israeli democracy, and it undermined the fragile balance of Israel as a Jewish and democratic state. The words equality and democracy do not appear in the law. Minority rights are not part of the law. Many critiques of the law pointed out that significant elements of the nation-state law are inconsistent with Israel's Declaration of Independence, which promises complete equality of social and political rights to all its inhabitants, irrespective of religion, race, or sex. Also notable is that nowhere in the law do we see the principle of equal protection under the law. Why is this significant to us as Jews, and in this room primarily American Jews? For many reasons that have to do with Jewish peoplehood, with the Jewish historical, spiritual, religious relationship to Israel. The law also establishes a responsibility of Israel for the welfare of Jews outside of Israel. Now, interestingly, earlier drafts of the bill spoke of Israel's responsibility to Jews everywhere. The change in language from Jews everywhere to Jews outside of the state of Israel is a piece of denying any obligation by the state to conservative, reform, or reconstructionist Jews within Israel. To help us understand the impact of this law as it has unfolded in the last 7 years from a legal, religious, practical, and human perspective, we are extremely fortunate to be joined by 2 experts today. Dr. Nasreen Hadad Haj-Yahya is a researcher, lecturer, and senior consultant and a renowned expert on Arab society and minority-majority relations in Israel. She has years of experience in contributing to, influencing, and analyzing government development plans in the fields of the labor market, formal and informal education, and state-minority relations. Her PhD from Tel Aviv University focused on the phenomenon of NEET among the younger Arab generation, people neither in education, employment, or training. Dr. Hadad Haj-Yahya is the author of numerous publications, articles, books, and opinion columns on topics related to socioeconomics, the development of Arab society, majority-minority relations, and the promotion of shared and equal society in Israel. In the past, she directed the program on Arab society in Israel at the Israel Democracy Institute, and she was a partner in the Portland Trust's Israel branch. Today, she's a board member at the New Israel Fund, in addition to lecturing and volunteering in a variety of social initiatives and platforms, and she serves as the head of research and development at the Albiadar Institute. We also will hear from Roy Peled, who is senior lecturer and associate professor at the Haim School of Law at the College of Management Academic Studies. He holds an LLB from the Interdisciplinary Center and an LLM and PhD from the Tel Aviv University Buckman Faculty of Law. His doctoral thesis dealt with legal mechanisms to promote fairness in the media and was written under the supervision of professors Daphne Bara Erez and Michael Bernhack. He taught at the Columbia School of Law as an associate in law from 2011 to 2013 and at UC Berkeley from 2019 to 2021. Dr. Peled also served as the chairperson, earlier as director, of the Movement for Freedom of Information in Israel and is a board member of the movement. He is a member of the public councils of Hashomer Hatzair and of Yesh Din, Volunteers for Human Rights. We are so honored to be able to learn from both of them today. The format of this session is going to be slightly longer presentations with slides from each of our speakers, after which we'll go directly into questions from the audience. We're going to take questions both on cards and at the microphone. If at any point during the conversation you think of a question, you can raise your hand and one of our fantastic JTS staff will hand you an index card so you can write your question. We'll also invite people to ask questions to the microphone, and we will remind you again later that we would like questions and not statements. First, we are thrilled to learn from Dr. Nasreen Hadad Haj-Yahya.
Thank you so much, Ayelet. So, hey everyone, I'm really thrilled to be here, and thank you for having me. Before we start, I would like, before I will go into details and numbers of my presentation, I would like to share with you a childhood story. Was when I was around 6 years old. When I was 6 years. זה עובד? Thank you. So when I was 6 years old, it was the first time that I went out from my neighborhood to, my grandfather took me to a demonstration in Kibbutz Gezer. Kibbutz Gezer is far from Ramle, from my neighborhood, for something like 5 minutes. And it was the first time that I went out from my neighborhood, and I went to a demonstration that Peace Now arranged in Kibbutz Gezer. It was a sunny Saturday, and I couldn't care less about the protest, and I was amazed by the swimming pool it was the first time that I see a swimming pool in the kibbutz. I saw kids riding their bikes safely, and I see a green fields. So the neighborhood that I grew up in was a very poor neighborhood, and I told my grandfather that when I will grow up, I want to raise my kids in the kibbutz because it looked like a heaven. And my grandfather told me that only Jews can live in the kibbutz. And I was really angry because he make my glass ceiling very low without even know what is a glass ceiling is. And I promised myself then that when I will grow up and I will have children, I will teach them to dream and to make the effort to be to achieve all they want. And today I'm a mother of 3 amazing girls. Carmel, she's studying law at Tel Aviv University, and Hala, now she's finishing high school, and Neil study in Yad Bayad bilingual school. And I can say that about 40 years later from this story, the glass ceiling is still low, and the nation state law make the reality much more complicated. But I can say that we have a lot of good organization and a lot of good activists that promote equality for the Palestinian minority within Israel. It was very important for me to say that we don't need law to feel as a second-class citizen within our homeland. The glass ceiling and the reality is much more complicated than law. And so now I'll start with my presentation. And I would like to say that in order to talk about the nation-state law, we need to begin by understanding the context. Well, Arab minority, it's not a small minority. We're talking at least Arabs are 20% of Israel population. It's not a small minority, and that also includes the people that live in East Jerusalem. Some live in villages behind the wall with limited access to Israel. They don't have all the legal rights, the same that people that live in Israel and have the Israeli citizenship. So Arab and Jews in Israel live in, for the most part, separated lives. We have separate routines, not so much because of the law, but because the system is built this way. And when I talk about the system, for example, the school system is divided to 4 sectors: the secular, the Jewish, religious Jewish, ultra-Orthodox, and the Arab. That means that Arab students and Jewish students do not have any interaction, don't interact with each other. And when we talk about the Arab minority, you need to understand that the same way that the Jewish people are divided to different groups, we are also very diverse minority. We have different religion. Part of us are Muslims, the majority of us are Muslim. We have Christian and Druze. We have geographical regions like the Bedouins that live in the Negev, the Triangle area, the Galil, and mixed towns, and of course, gender. So when we talk about the Palestinian minority, we need to understand that large part of the minority of don't succeed to integrate within the labor force. The lower employment rates of Arab men and women are compelled with a significantly lower wage, leads to, and that of course leads to a very high poverty rates. Almost 40% of Arab families live under the poverty line. When we talk about children, almost every second child lives under the poverty line. Well, since 2008, Israeli government drafts several governmental resolutions for the economic development of the Arab population with budgets larger than ever before. The most known investment are Government Resolution 922 and the current one of the 5-year plan for 2022 to 26 is Government Resolution 550, which is the widest and the largest plan till today, covering many areas and budgets at around 30 billion shekel, about $8 billion. This governmental resolution shows that through the recent government have a shift towards the extreme right, there are importance that work towards development and closing gaps. This includes internal processes like the Our Commission of the early 2000s, pressure by international organizations like the OECD, Israel civil service officials, and major civil society organizations, and some members of the government. Some ministers in the current government, like Ben-Gvir and Smotrich, are doing all they can to cancel and to freeze those budgets. The plan was already cut by about 15% because of the war, while other plans like were left and without any cut. It's very hard to talk about any positive thing during those days, but it's very important to say that we need to admit that thanks to this governmental investment and development, and thanks to a large part of people here, part of the people that sitting here also, people like people from the New Israel Fund, thank to you, and people from the SVF promoted several programs that succeeded to promote the Arab minority, and so we can see a lot of positive trends. We see significant increase in the number of Arab students in the higher education institution. We see greater inclusion of the tech industry, white-collar and public service position. We see the increase in Arab employment rate, which is very positive trends. We can't talk about the Arab minority in Israel without talking about the crime within our towns, within our villages. In the last 2 years, the number of the victims reached level higher than ever before. More than 230 victims during the last 2 years. Sorry. In 2022, during the Bennett-Lapid government, an interministerial committee created a plan that managed to decrease crime of the first time in many years. However, since that plan worked only for 1 year, the government was only short-lived, as you know, and the plan to fight crime was stopped by the current government. We are also witnessing a sharp increase in crime in the past 3 years. This year was already have more than 60 victims from the Arab society. I need also to say that the crime is taking over not only the Arab street, but also when we talk about feeling safe, even within the Jewish cities, the crime is taking over all the place. Ben Gvir promised a lot of people that he will take care of people, but we know that he didn't. That. Okay, another important context to understand the situation of Arab citizens in Israel is the complex issue of our identity. As you may know, we are part of the Palestinian people, and more than 20% of us have family in Gaza or in the West Bank. At the same time, we are also the citizen of the state, and this is our homeland, where we want to feel belong as full member, also in terms of decision making. As you know, as you can see in the graph on the right, the complexity is much harder to Jews to accept, while most of Arab feel and believe that the two parts of our identity, the Israeli one and the national one, can live together and won't have any clash. Due to the government party's low participation, we have low political influence and historical marginalization. The Arab localities and institutions are under budgeted, averaging the Arab population ability to mobilize. For example, the Arab school system consistently received 20 to 40% less than the Jewish school system. The marginalization of the Arab minority and the discrimination that Arabs suffer lead to alienation and frustration, especially among the younger generation. Although the Arab population suffer from discrimination, must still, the majority of us want to make a change through democratic institution and to have greater influence of politics. For example, survey that the Israel Democracy Institute have done during the last few years shows that more than 80% of the Arab minority want to see our parties part of the government and want to see Arab ministers. On the other hand, when we ask the Jewish population about our integration within the political game, we have a majority that won't accept us as part of the game. So the last 3 years were characterized by a raise of instrument against Arabs, especially during the Lapid-Bennett government, when an Arab party, Mansour Abbas, was part of the government for the first time and after outbreak of the current ongoing war. Well, I want to move talking about the current situation, and we need to understand the major effect of that October 7 massacre and the war in Gaza since have on state-minority relations. In the beginning of the war, we saw a wave of solidarity within Arab society, since we were also shocked by the events of October 7. As the war continued, it brought to the surface the complexity of our identity. We saw the loss of life in Gaza, while the most Jews Israeli did not see it. We have families and that kept telling us how the situation in Gaza is awful. And unfortunately, when we have the privilege to see the news that the Israeli TV is בעצם יש לנו את האפשרות לראות את החדשות גם בישראל וגם מהעולם הערבי ששידרו בעצם מה קורה בעזה.
So they're able to consume both the Israeli news that's broadcasted within Israel, but also other Arab news sources that are available internationally, so they're consuming news from both sources.
Thank you. At the same time, the ongoing war brought about growing tension between Jews and Arab citizens. A significant percentage of Arab reported that they don't feel comfortable going to Jewish or mixed localities, expressing themselves freely on the social media or speaking in Arabic near Jews. On the economic level, we saw increased level of unemployment among Arab citizens, and as always, during crisis situation, it takes longer to the Arab minority to get back to the employment market because we are represented in low-tech and non-professional jobs, which are always hit harder during this situation. I'm going to stop here, but I want to say that although the situation is really hard, and with this current government, we see a lot of ministers that try to freeze budgets and try to do all their best to hit hard NGOs that promote shared society. But I really believe that we have a lot of good forces within the Israeli society that still believe that we can promote shared society and we can promote equality. So the bad forces within our society had a lot of קיבלו המון במה, והגיע הזמן לתפוס את הבמה שלהם.
So some of the worst forces in Israeli society now have a huge platform, and it's time for others to reclaim the platform.
תודה.
And now I'm so thrilled to invite Dr. Roy Peled.
So, hi everybody, and thank you for having me, and thank you, JTS, for the invitation, and thank you all for caring for our country. I care more and more for yours, but that's for a different conference, I guess. I'll say a few things about the basic law, nation state of Israel. I may deviate from a few things that you said earlier, but we can talk about that as we go on. But I do want to give a bit of a background. I'll give a short background on our Constitution, not for teaching purposes, no exam afterwards. I'm grading these days, so God knows I don't want any more of that. But I think it explains some of the situation that leads to some of these problems. I'll talk about conflicting visions about the status of the Arab minority in Israel, the basic law itself, its legal implications, and some events prior and following October 7th, and some thoughts on moving forward. Nasreen spared me a few comments, so maybe I'll be as concise as she was. I imagine most of you know this document, the Declaration of Independence of the State of Israel. What is not often known is that one line there says that as of this declaration, May 15th, 1948, the state will be run by interim institutions, which will be replaced by regular institutions in accordance with a constitution that will be approved no later than October 1st, 1948. Now, you all know Israelis, you know we're not known for our punctuality, but still we're way off here. And what I want to raise here is why that happened. And the reason that happened, there are several reasons, like any historical development, but it has much to do with David Ben-Gurion. I think one of the greatest men to walk the earth, but not flawless. And there are a few explanations. He liked power, and the Constitution always limits your power, so that's one explanation. But one that's more important for our purposes is the idea that Israel is in the making, that you don't want to carve in stone its nature. It actually had less to do with the Arab population that nobody thought a lot about then, and more to do with the ultra-Orthodox, which Ben-Gurion wanted on board and was afraid that defining the nature of the state, answering questions about equality for women, equality for different streams in Judaism, will push the ultra-Orthodox off-board. And therefore, he said, we can do without a constitution. That we don't really need that. Let's not sort of shake our relationships at this point. So there was a commitment for a constitution. It never happened, at least not in the form of an actual constitution as you know it from here. What happened was in 1950 that the Knesset decides to go forward step by step, as they called it, and work on chapters of the Constitution, and each chapter that will be agreed upon will become what we call today a basic law. And beginning 1958 up to 1988, the Knesset confirmed 9 of these basic laws on the, what we call the institutional component that every constitution has. So the equivalent of Articles 1, 2, and 3 of your constitution. We had in those 9 basic laws, the judiciary, the executive, the legislature, state comptroller, the capital, Jerusalem, et cetera, et cetera. What's important to say is that all these basic laws, although some of them were controversial, the one in Jerusalem, for instance, were always bipartisan. You know, we have more than 2 parties, but in American terms, bipartisan. Were agreed upon across the political spectrum. 1992, we have the first 2 basic laws that deal with human rights. Again, the equivalent of maybe your Bill of Rights. These 2 are confirmed by a bipartisan majority. So agreed upon by the coalition of the right at the time, the Likud government, and the opposition of Labor and Meretz. 2014, now notice, well, if I'll go for that, for 22 years later, there is no basic law. And why is that? After the 1992 basic law, the Supreme Court had a series of decisions that struck down laws mostly upsetting the Orthodox parties. Ayelet, the leader of Shas, following that said, if it would be suggested to turn the 10 Commandments into a basic law, I will vote against it because I have no idea how the Supreme Court will interpret it. So for many years, this whole project was put on hold and there were no basic laws legislated. But when the recent right-wing governments became more confident in their rule in the majority, they began to think it's actually maybe a useful tool to have. And in 2014, this basic law about a referendum in case of withdrawal, not important for our case, other than it was the first that passed on a strict coalition opposition vote. So all coalition members in favor, all opposition members against, and that was also the case with the second basic law to be enacted since, Basic Law Israel, the nation state of the Jewish people, which we'll get to in more details in a minute. So I want to say a few words about conflicting visions on the status of the Arab minority since or through these points in history that I mentioned. For many, many years, the state of Israel doesn't really ask itself, what is our end game in terms of our relationship with the Arab minority? It's just not a question. There's an administrative question, how we handle Arab localities, how we handle opposition, Arabs in politics, but there's no sort of in-depth discussion of their role in the country. That begins to change with the Oslo Accords. And not from the Israeli side, but actually more from the Arab side. Well, from both sides, I'd say, in these ways. Arabs begin to say to themselves, wait. Israel is going to strike an agreement with the PLO. And where does that leave us? The PLO is representing only the Palestinians outside of Israel per se, not officially. but in practice. That's what they're discussing about with the government of Israel. The government of Israel insisted, and I think rightfully so, but this creates a problem, that the PLO does not represent Israeli Arabs and that nothing about Israeli Arabs is part of this process. So Israelis begin to ask themselves, where does this leave us? And is anyone representing us? Are we deserted by our leadership in both senses, the national one, the PLO, and the Israeli government? And something else happens, maybe as sort of a backlash to that, is that Jews also begin to worry. They insist that anything that has to do with Arab Israelis is an internal political matter. But as voices rise opposing or raising these questions, some Jews begin to feel, well, so if there is now going to be a Palestinian state, I'll give you a spoiler, that never happened, even following Oslo. But the sense was at the time that this may happen. And then there are claims for binationality of Israel. Where does that leave us? Is this going to be a solution of a 1.5 Palestinian states and half Jewish state? So there begins to be more discussion about this nature. Come the year 2000 riots. Again, I want to go a bit faster, but very, very conflicting views by Arabs, where 12 Arabs were killed by the police in riots that one has to say were very violent and cut off the country for a while in two halves. But Arabs see they're treated by the police not as protesting citizens, but as enemies, as terrorists. Jews begin to think that, wait, there is a significant force within the country that challenges what we never thought about and took for granted, that we basically own this place, and serious security threats. As I said, you could not for a day or two go from the north to the south because of these riots. This leads to an interesting development in 2006, where different Arab organizations, it's a good question why 4 different initiatives, Nasreen mentioned that there is diversity within 4 different initiatives within the Arab sector create what is known as the vision documents, saying, look, we gave thought to what we think needs to be the relationship between the state and its national Palestinian minority. Each of them has a different voice, but basically they talk about either binationality or sort of a French version of republicanism, where all citizens are equal. But they present the Jewish majority with a vision. Not one I necessarily like, any of them, but a well-argued and well sort of thought-through vision. I, at the time, was asked to serve as a research assistant for a team of academics in Tel Aviv University that was brought together to respond, to put on the table the Jewish vision for the state's relationship with its minority. We met 4 or 5 times, and we just couldn't. They just couldn't. Don't want to blame myself. I was just a research assistant. They just couldn't agree on how to present a vision for the relationship between the state and its minority. Now, this also played out in the courts, and I want to mention 2 quick cases that present very different notions of the relationship between the state and its minority. The Hadad case, I think, is maybe a little better known. The Hadad case in 2000 is a case where a citizen, a nurse from the village of Bakr al-Rabia, wants to improve his life standards, mostly the education of his daughters, and he wants to purchase a piece of land at a community that's being set up nearby his home. He goes there, and he's told, you look like a nice guy, but we don't accept Arabs here. And he goes to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court, in a not very long and not very complicated case, says, no, that can't fly. These lands are communities are erected on state land, and the state cannot discriminate. between Jews and Arabs. There are a few complexities there because the Jewish agency is involved and how the lands were purchased to begin with, but basically the Supreme Court says no. And it's an almost unanimous decision. I want to mention Justice Michael Cheshin because Justice Cheshin is considered, not rightfully by the way, but is considered a conservative judge. At some stages, even in this current judicial overhaul, he was the hero of the right. Again, I don't think that for good reasons. But he is known for very lengthy and heated opinions. He writes a one-line opinion in this case. He says, in receiving their rights from the state, the petitioners were discriminated against and deserve a remedy from this court. That's all his decision. I'm saying that because I want to contrast it, with the second case. In 2002, Adala, which is a very important legal NGO fighting for equal rights of Arabs in Israel, petitions the Supreme Court against 5 municipalities that have a sizable Arab minority. And they ask the court to force these municipalities to have Arabic on all their street signs, next to Hebrew, obviously. And the court, in this case, accepts, the majority, accepts their petition. And Justice Cheshin, which I mentioned a minute ago, is in the minority and thinks it should be rejected. And the difference is that this case is not about civic equality for the individual. This case is about the presence of the Arab minority in the public sphere. And Justice Barak, together with Justice Donner, say the Arab minority is a native minority. It's not like immigrants from Russia, for instance. And it has the right for its culture and its language, of course, as part of its culture, to thrive in its homeland. Justice Cheshin says, maybe so, maybe not, but it's not something for the court to decide. If it were a civic problem of an individual, if someone would get lost because he can't find his way because there are no signs, I'd rule in favor of him. But the petitioners made it very clear, and they did, that this is a political question, that they want the court to back their right to be present in the Israeli public sphere. And Justice Cheshin thinks that that is very different from Ka'adan. So there are conflicting visions here within the legal establishment, I'd say, about what equality for the minority means. So we come to the nation-state law. I have 4 minutes, 5 minutes? Now, and here maybe I'll deviate. There's nothing unusual about the nation-state law if you think about constitutions. Many of them have a preamble saying, this is the identity of our state. And if people basically accept the idea that Israel is a Jewish state, it could be under, I'll say, I think many different circumstances, a very reasonable opening for a constitution. That's not unusual methodologically to have a preamble that says, this is the character of our state. There are, however, some substantial issues. I'll mention 4, and Rabbi Cohen mentioned them, some of them earlier. The lack of any reference to equality, I'll say a word about in a minute. The exclusive national self-determination, we need to say. It doesn't say that only Jews have a right to self-determination, but to national self-determination. The change in the status of Arabic, and the question of governmental support for Jewish settlements. Now, and I'll say a word about each of them in a minute. Now, we have to remember the political background here is, as I mentioned earlier, sort of a growing insecurity of Jews in the legitimization of the idea of Israel as a Jewish state. You could debate how justified those fears are. I think that they're a result of some fear-mongering. On the other hand, if you think 6 blocks south of here, those fears got some support in recent times. So that's sort of on the Jewish psyche. It's also a time where there is growing demands, as Nasreen mentioned, for integration of Arabs into politics. And this is, for the far right, a way to poke the Arab parties in the eye, to say, we want to remind you that you are not equal citizens in this country. We want to make sure that everybody remembers its nature. Now, as I said, if you look at the text, I don't think it's an impossible text. If you look at the context, that delivers a very different message. That's the political motivation. It's also an anti-judiciary political motivation, and the initiators say it very clearly. The court preferred along the years the democratic part of the state's definition on account of the Jewish part, and we want to change that equilibrium. We want to bring the Jewish part to be more dominant. And there are, though, some silver linings also in the process. I'll mention maybe one a bit in a minute. So there is a petition to the Supreme Court against this law, and the Supreme Court, as I think anyone could expect, rejects the petition but says a few important things. And you have to remember, this is a petition against a constitutional amendment, so legally it's not a simple thing at all. But the Supreme Court says, look, the Supreme Court says, look, the law says that Arabic will be a language with a special status. That is actually, in the signage case I mentioned earlier, what Chief Justice Barak said, that Israel is the primary official language in the state, but Arabic, as the language of a sizable native minority, deserves a special status. So there's no real change in reality there, and actually, in a way, it's a recognition of a collective right of the Arab minority. The law talks about the government supporting Jewish settlements, and some people try to argue that that is an overruling of the Qa'dan case, but actually I have to say that in the bill, the draft bill, it said that the government can support separate settlements. That was changed. That could not go through the Knesset, which again is a good sign. The Knesset wouldn't legislate something talking about segregative, is that a word? I don't know. Settlements. It did say Jewish settlements, and the court says, let's see what that means in the future. It may mean, like a Jewish state, a community whose culture is Jewish, but clearly, and by the way, even some of the initiators of the law said clearly any Arab can live in a Jewish community. It's not an idea to segregate them. Maybe sort of more intentional religious communities, we don't know. Let's wait to see how that is used. So the court sort of interprets the law as very benign. Now, it's been used by some judges later. First of all, the number one use of this law since then is by Jewish criminals petitioning the government not to extradite them because of the clause Rabbi Cohen mentioned earlier of the state's commitment to protect Jews. But that never succeeded. There were a few cases where judges in the lower instances used the court once to deny Arab petitioners who asked for support of their reimbursement on expenses of students driving to Arab schools somewhere else from their municipality, and the lower instance judge said, well, the municipality has the right to be a Jewish settlement and doesn't have to support that, but that has been overruled, I have to say, not the outcome, but the argument that the nation-state law says that has been overruled by the Court of Appeals. Also, another case made sort of a problematic use of that, and it was also overruled by the Supreme Court. Actually, in two cases, Arabs made use of the language clause to say that we have a right for hearings, for instance, by a public authority to be handled in Arabic, or that sides to a court case parties to a court case can submit papers in Arabic, and the court upheld that. So the impact was not dramatic officially. That said, Nasreen touched on this, and well, I don't have to add that because Nasreen touched it and Arabs will say it better than me. There are social implications, right? There is a message coming with this bill that was not necessarily embraced by the judiciary and not necessarily embraced by the parliament, but definitely pushed by certain factions in the parliament that says, we want to remind you who's the boss. And that has all kinds of effects. Also, lawyers say on our willingness to fight the state in some fronts out of fear that future interpretations of this law will be very problematic, and the courts are changing. And what happened so far is not necessarily what will happen forward. I'll skip this. Maybe we'll get to it in the discussion. Because I'll skip this. And share a few thoughts about moving forward. Nothing is going to change without a political change. Again, Nasreen mentioned this. Good things happened in the civil service in the past decade. At the same time, horrible things happened on the political level. And there was an ongoing escalating rhetoric against the Arab population in support of, if not explicitly, definitely implicitly, Jewish supremacy. And no real change in the currents can happen without change on the political level. That said, and if that happens, we do see signs of more willingness for political integration of Arabs. Conflicting signs sometimes, but that is also there. We do see, and again, this was mentioned, a more economical integration, again, mostly because of the civil service understanding how crucial this is for the state, not for the minority. I mean, not that they're not mutually exclusive, but the motivation was how important it is for the state. And at the end of the day, if we really come to an actual Israeli constitution, it will have to answer the question, which some may not want to deal with, but will never settle in a sort of secure and sense of coming to an actual permanent nature of the state without giving some sort of recognition, one way or another, to the fact that there are not just non-Hebrew speaking citizens in Israel, but an actual national minority within the state. Thank you.
Thank you so much to both of you. You've given us so much to think about. And again, I want to remind people that if you want to write down a question on a card, raise your hand. If you prefer to ask a question in the microphone, that's an option too, but we'll encourage you to keep your questions short so that we can hear as much as we can from our guests today. I'm just going to try to pull out a couple of threads from what you said while we're waiting for the questions to come forward. One is this major question. Is it possible to define the character of Israel as a Jewish character without it becoming Jewish supremacy? A question that comes up in a lot of different ways. One is about, I think sometimes we want to see a linear trajectory towards, greater equality.
Arc of history.
And we know from what happens across the world, right, that the arc of history is not necessarily linear, and that often when a society is experiencing greater integration, greater equality of minorities, there's a tremendous backlash before there's an embrace. I think also notable to me was the sense of neither Jews nor Arabs, Palestinian citizens of Israel, feeling safe or secure, both in terms of basic personal safety. We heard about the tremendous epidemic of violence in Palestinian Israeli society. We know, of course, about the daily dangers. facing anyone who lives in Israel. I was really struck this winter. I was with the Rabbinical Assembly in Rahat, which is the biggest Arab-Israeli city in Israel, and we met with an imam there who said, for Palestinian citizens of Israel, we have spent this year and a half crying out of both eyes. We're crying simultaneously for our Israeli, Jewish, and Arab friends who have been killed and abducted on and since October 7th, and for our family in Gaza, who we are constantly learning of their death and destruction. We're crying with both eyes. So what does it mean to be constantly navigating so much grief and loss and uncertainty and this worry, am I going to be disappeared? Am I going to be pushed out of the place that I call home? So there's a question here on terminology. What's the difference, and why would someone choose to identify or identify others as an Israeli Arab versus a Palestinian citizens of Israel? What are the implications of those terms, and who chooses to use them? Do you want to start?
No.
So it really depends on the context. So, for example, when we speak with the Israeli government, we use the terms of, we especially concentrated on our citizenship, but when we talk in such forms, it's very important for us to show that we have a very complex identity. We are part of the two people. We have the Israeli citizenship, which is really tremendous, which it's really important identity because I'm part of the state of Israel, whether I want or I don't want. So I'm part of the state, and in the meanwhile, I'm also part of the Palestinian people. I have a large family. More than 500 people of my family live in a refugee camp of Jabalia in Gaza. So we are part of the two peoples, the Palestinian and the Israeli, and we feel sorrow, and we are part of the two group. And although it's complicated, but I think that we have a very special rule because there is no other minority in the whole world that speaks the two languages, that know the suffer of the two people. We live, study, work. We spend most of our time with Jews. Not only me, the majority of my community live in Jewish spaces. So we know why it's so important to the Jewish people to have their own state, why they need the definition of Jewish state. So and we know the sorrow and the pain of the Jewish people. At the same time, we also have families in the West Bank. I have a family in Hebron and in Gaza. So the fact that I know what kind of suffer my family is dealing with, all the distraction and all the pain in Gaza, well, we have a special and unique role in promoting peace between the two people because there is no other minority that really know how to be a bridge between the two people. So I'm Palestinian. I'm a mother. I'm Israeli. Our identity is very complicated. In some places, I use the term, I don't even deal with my national identity or neither with my Israeli citizenship. In some places, we defined ourselves as female, sometimes I defined myself as a researcher, sometimes as Palestinian, sometimes as Israeli. It really depends on the context. But to be honest, my dream is to be to feel comfortable to say the word, to use the definition Palestinian when I talk with the Israeli government, because today, when we talk, and you talked about it, the official officer want us to integrate because of economic reason. And I want the state of Israel to promote my integration, not only because of economic reason, because I'm a citizen, because sorry, English is my first language, so this is Me'ut Yalid, native minority. And I want the state to treat me not as its enemy. I'm part of the state, and when the state of Israel will succeed, it will be also my success. So it's either it will be a lose-lose situation to all of us, or and it could be a win-win. So I really believe in a win-win situation. And I believe that this kind of discussion can help us to come to this situation that also the state of Israel and the government, not the current one, because I lost the hope from people like from Ben-Gvir and Netanyahu and Smotrich to try to look at us as a human being and to treat us equally.
Just two short points. One of the graphs Nadine showed earlier showed a spike in identification as Israelis in recent times. And I'll just want to say it didn't go very way back, but the last time we saw such a spike was during Rabin's government. Also where these polls of asking how you identify yourself saw a significant rise in Israeli Arabs, Palestinians identifying as Israelis. And that's just to say that government policy matters. That also, in a way, refers to the question about the arc of history, because things can change for the better, too. Not that I'm very, very optimistic these days, but we need to remember that that's also possible.
And I think similarly, the question of identification, can rise when there's more optimism, and can also rise in a time of great tragedy, when that identification kicks in. And then when do things get so extreme that it starts to feel more distant? There's a couple of questions specifically about the nation-state law. One is if you can give some examples in case law of where the nation-state law has been used to the detriment of Arab or non-Jewish citizens of the state.
Well, there are two cases I mentioned very shortly earlier. Well, actually, there are four by two judges that, again, were both overruled later in appeal. One is really outrageous, and this is an outlier judge, Moshe Drori, who the government currently wants to promote. By the way, he's an he's retired, but they want to promote him to, I think, to be the commissioner on complaints on judges. That said that Jews are terror victims, Jewish terror victims should be considered, the compensation they deserve is different as a result of the Jewish nation law that says that the state has an increased commitment to their safety. That's one. The other was students from the town of Carmiel that petitioned the court to force the municipality to reimburse them on expenses of transportation to an Arab school, because there was no Arab school in Carmiel. They could study there, but they want to study in an Arab school, obviously. And again, one of the reasonings the judge used to say that the Carmiel doesn't have to reimburse them for that was that it's a Jewish town, and the idea of a Jewish town is supported by the nation-state law. Again, to say the appeal courts overruled both of these.
And speaking of appeal, is there a mechanism for the basic law to be amended to include concepts of democracy, democratic state, recognition of minority rights?
Yeah, the Knesset can always do that. I don't see the court creating hardly striking down, but not creating, amending an amendment. That's sort of unthinkable. To the, sort of to steelman the arguments here, the people behind the legislation say we already have equality under human dignity. This law is not against equality, but it complements other existing basic laws. So to be fair with them, that's their argument, that it's already there and it need not be added. Of course, it's already there implicitly, not explicitly, and therefore I think there's good reason to fear from courts in the future.
Nasreen, this is a question for you, and I recognize that you're carrying a big burden here at this convening because you are the only Palestinian citizen of Israel who we are hearing from in these 2 days, and so we know that you can't speak for every single Palestinian citizen of Israel. There are some questions about kind of attitudes and positioning of Palestinian citizens of Israel. One is if the imposition of martial law on the Arab population for 18 years leave lasting resentments among Palestinian Israelis and a legacy of Jewish supremacy. What was the impact of the imposition of martial law for so long on the experience of Palestinian Israelis? And related to that, what's the attitude of Palestinian citizens of Israel towards the occupation and towards Hamas and its leadership? That could take all the rest of our time.
And then some.
And then some.
So when I finished my presentation, I say that I'm optimistic. I'm optimistic because 2 months ago, I watched a movie about the Memshala Tzva'i that a young lady called Daniel did a movie on her grandfather that was a Moshela Tzva'i of Taibe, the city that I'm living in now. And he was a young...
So this, it's martial law. So she saw a documentary recently, a young woman telling the story of her grandfather and his experience under martial law.
Yeah, 48 to 66.
48 to 66, says my lawyer over here.
This young lady made a movie on her grandfather, and he was 24 years old, and he decided who will get who can went to get any treatment of doctors, who can be a teacher, who can be a principal at the school. 24 years young man decided who will live and who will die in Taibe, and he actually control a very large population, the life of thousands of people. And when I looked at the movie and say how much power this man have and what kind of life we have right now, although we have a lot of discrimination, although the current government, although the nation-state law and the anti-democratic laws that Netanyahu lead during the last 15 years, there is a huge progress, and we see more and more Arabs in the civil service. We saw that the Bennett Lapid government have an Arab party within the coalition. So we had a lot of progress during from 48 till today, but unfortunately, the progress is not enough. 76 years after establishing the State of Israel, the Arab minority are not legitimate in the State of Israel, not in the political, game, and unfortunately, Netanyahu and the people surrounding him are doing all they can to make us illegitimate, because they understand that when we will be legitimate enough, he will lose the control of the state of Israel, and then maybe more democratic forces will control the state of Israel. Now, for the second question of Hamas.
So let me just, so what you're saying is that it's possible both to see that there was a significant improvement in the situation for Palestinian citizens of Israel with the end of martial law, but that true equality was never achieved, and we're now seeing a diminishing of the status of Arab citizens of Israel by this current government.
Exactly. And the second question about Hamas. So before I speak about Hamas and the awful massacre of October 7, I want to say that when this awful massacre happened, the Arab minority in Israel was shocked, the same as every Israeli and every human being in this world. Then when we started to see the numbers on the TV, the first number was 22 victims, and then it was 40, and then it was 80, and it was unbelievable to understand the awful massacres that happened. And I want to say that Hamas, when he attacked the villages around Gaza, he did not, אני חשוב לי להגיד את זה בשפה העברית ושמישהו יתרגם אותי. בסופו של יום, כשחמאס תקף את יישובי העוטף, ובסופו של יום לא דילג גם מעל הפלסטינים, אזרחי ישראל שהיו שם, היו נשים שעטו חיג'אב, שהוא רצח אותם, היו יותר מ-40 קורבנות שנרצחו על ידי חמאס, וכשחמאס ירה...
So, that on October 7th, Hamas did not distinguish between the Jewish and Arab villages and settlements on the Gaza envelope, did not skip over Bedouin and Arab villages. There were women wearing hijab who were murdered that day, along with many, many, many Jews who were murdered that day.
וגם כשטילים נורו לעבר ישראל, לעבר יישובי העוטף, זה לא דילג מעל היישובים הבדואים, וגם שם היו בעצם המון קורבנות שנרצחו ואיבדו את חייהם בעקבות המתקפה של חמאס.
And they did not distinguish between Bedouin villages and Bedouin encampments. There were many, many Bedouins who were killed by Hamas.
בלי שום קשר לזה, חמאס מדבר בשם האסלאם שלי. והאסלאם שלי הוא רחוק מאוד, הערכים שמגיעים עם חמאס הם רחוקים מאוד מהאסלאם שאני מגיעה איתו.
So this she's saying as a person of faith, as a Muslim of faith, that the Islam that Hamas claims to represent is extremely far away from the Islam that Nasreen practices and believes in.
חשוב לי מאוד להגיד, לפני חודש וקצת הייתה לנו ישיבת בורד בקרן החדשה לישראל, והייתי צריכה לשאת דברי תורה, והייתי צריכה ללמוד את פרשת משפטים.
So she wants to say, it's very important to her to say, a few months ago there was a board meeting of the New Israel Fund, Nasreen is a board member, and she was given the task of giving the Dvar Torah at the board meeting, and she had to give a Dvar Torah on Parshat Mishpatim.
That's more than I had to do since high school.
וכשלמדתי את הפרשה, ועד כמה יש בה אלמנטים של תיקון עולם, של שוויון, כמה המילה שלום נוכחת במקורות היהודיים, בכל אספקט, ראיתי כמה יש מכנים משותפים בין היהדות, שמאוד מאוד רחוקה מהיהדות שהממשלה הנוכחית מייצגת, לבין האסלאם שלי. מבחינתי...
So as she was preparing this Dvar Torah, she was struck by how much the concepts of justice and equality come up again and again in Parshat Mishpatim and in the commentaries around it. And she was struck by how much more that has in common with her Islam than the Judaism that is expressed by the leadership of the current Israeli government.
חמאס לא מייצג אותי, הוא אף פעם לא ייצג, מבחינתי המנהיגים שמנהיגים את שני העמים כרגע, הם רחוקים מאוד מהערכים שהם מדברים בשמם. כולי תקווה שהכוחות הטובים ושני העמים יתפסו פיקוד, כי באמת באמת מגיע לנו עתיד אחר.
So the leaders of both of these governments, of these factions, are so far away from the religious values that they claim to espouse and they claim to speak for. And she prays very much that the other voices, the voices within both religions that want to espouse other values, should have a turn to express their values and enact their values.
And although I came to speak about the Arab minority in Israel, I really want to say that without ending the conflict, without ending the occupation, without going out from the occupied territories, there won't be any peace, not inside the Israeli society. It ruined every good party in the Israeli society and in the Palestinian society. So I really believe if we want to heal ourselves, if we want to see a different Middle East, we need desperately to end the occupation. We need to give the Palestinian people hope. We need to have a Jewish state and Palestinian state living nearby, and to start in healing ourselves and the two people, because also the distraction in Gaza, the fact that more than 80% lost all its property. We have more than 50,000 people that lost their beloved people. There is no one family in Gaza that did not lost a member of it. This kind of reality that there is no hope for 2 million Palestinians in Gaza and no hope for the Palestinians living in the West Bank, I don't see any future to the state of Israel without giving hope to the million Palestinians living around us, including the Palestinian living in Israel. And believe me, there is enough place for everyone. We just need a brave leadership to imagine a different future to our children, because if we will keep this current leadership, there won't be place not to the Israeli people, not to the Jewish people, and not to the Palestinian people. It will be a desert, and all the good people are gonna leave. So we need to do. I think that we are in a critical period in the history, and we need to make it much more. We need to do a larger effort to help the Palestinian minority in getting vote more in the next election, and to send this government to the history, because we had enough. The massacre of October 7 and all the anti-democratic values and all the anti-democratic laws, the הפיכה המשטרית.
Judicial overhaul.
All of that happened when Netanyahu was in charge, and he should take the whole responsibility for all the disasters that happened in our dear homeland.
I want to make two comments following that. First, I want to connect that to your comment earlier about Jewish supremacy. Is it possible to have a Jewish state without a notion of Jewish supremacy? I believe it is. But it is only possible if you support the creation of a Palestinian state or a binational state. I'm part of a shrinking minority that believes that while a two-state solution is less viable than in the past, it's still more viable than any other solution. And if you cannot say, I don't think Palestinians have a right to self-determination, but I do think Jews have, and make that not compatible with Jewish supremacy. I do think that if you believe the two people have equal rights, then those are not necessarily mutually exclusive. So that connects to that. I think there's one more thing I want to say following Nasreen that's important to point out. And I'll make two seemingly contradictory comments, but I think both are true. If we learn something from October 7th, is not to undermine the intentions of extremists and fundamentalists and not to underestimate the threat. And there are extremists among Jewish Israelis and among Palestinian Israelis. Last week, just outside of my kibbutz, Azorea, a member of our kibbutz was murdered by a terrorist from Wadi Ara, an Israeli Arab, that rammed into a soldier, and when he came out to help, he shot him. And that was not a happy day in the kibbutz. And the terrorist was an Arab Israeli, and that was the second time in the last year, we didn't see much of this in the past. So I imagine there are these growing extreme fundamentals tendencies also among some groups, among Israeli Arabs, and as I said, if we learn something from October 7th, it's not to overlook these things. That said, I have to say this. On October 7th and in the following days, everybody not everybody, that's not fair. Politicians and others in the far right in Israel were looking through a magnifying glass to find expressions of happiness among Israeli Arabs. I have to say, I myself, I had concerns of my own. October 7th, I lost a cousin, I lost a good friend, another one was taken captive. But I myself was very worried from October 7th, what is going to be now? Who is going to be foolish enough among the Arab leadership to say something that is ambiguous? There was again, I don't like using extremes, not 100%, but 99.9% expressions of sympathy with the Jewish population. As Nasreen said, of course, there were also Arab kills. A friend, Arab law professor, told me it might have been easier for us if it was just Jews killed, but it was a shared tragedy. All the Arab political leadership, which I don't think is always worthy of praise, not all of it. Some of it I knew would be great. Abbas Mansour was mentioned, Ayman Uda, but some tend to say the wrong things at the wrong time. Not at all in this case. All of them to the last showed responsibility to the coexistence between Jews and Arabs in Israel. And some of our ministers were in search to find excuses to go after Arab leaders, Arab mayors, and just failed because they were not handed what they were hoping to find. And that is something important to note.
Thank you. We have another question, also kind of thinking about the future. If both options were possible, if there was a possibility of a two-state solution, or if there was a possibility of a single binational state, do you have a sense of what Palestinian citizens of Israel would prefer?
So there is no one answer. Part of the people would love to live in the Palestinian state, to practice their Arabic, to live in a homogenic space. But I believe that large part of us won't leave the state of Israel. I really believe that living in a heterogenic space, the fact that we speak the two languages, the fact that we are enjoying the two culture is a bless. Our president, Vice President Rivlin said that living together, it's a bless. It's not a
curse. It's a blessing.
Yeah. So I really believe in it. It's not only, I started with a personal story about Kibbutz Gezer, and I said that my dream was to live in the kibbutz. So unfortunately, I still cannot live in the kibbutz because only Jews can live in the kibbutz. But today, I'm building my home, and in June, I will move to Neve Shalom. Neve Shalom is a mixed village that people choose to live together, that people want their children to study together, that want to have a shared life. So I believe that the majority of us want the shared life, want to be together and to raise their children with a Jewish neighborhood. Sorry.
You brought statistics about how, and you both talked about how segregated Israeli society is in so many different sectors. We are very aware that separate but equal is usually not something that's possible to enact. Where are there places where kind of it benefits both populations to have some separation, and where are there places where it could benefit them to have more integration, even though, of course, in both scenarios, more equality would be better than less?
First of all, I want to remind us, you talk about separate but equal in the American sense. I urge you to look at some of the map of demographics in the United States. Separate but equal was struck down as a legal mechanism. It doesn't mean that actual social segregation was eliminated.
We got plenty of separate and not equal right here.
Yeah. I urge you to look at the map of the elections in Germany last month and see how segregated Germany is 30 years after. So I'm just saying this to say that integration is really, really difficult socially. Legally, it's easy to take a decision, make a decision. That said, we backtracked on those things. I mean, Nasreen mentioned, so there's more of that in the universities now. There's more of that in the workplace, I think, although still sort of layered, because in the workplace, in hospitals, actually, there's a good change. It used to be just like the assistants and nurses. Now you see more and more doctors.
And healthcare is one of the most integrated fields.
Yeah, that's
is
what
that
I'm
true?
saying.
Yeah, I mean, I remember Rabbi Noah Satzat, who's the executive director of ACRI, the Association for Civil Rights in Israel, said at any given moment, so kind of, right now it's 10 o'clock or is it 9 o'clock in Israel, there are more Palestinian citizens of Israel working in hospitals at this moment than have ever been involved in any kind of terrorist activity.
Oh, that's for sure. That's for sure. But in spite of everything I said, the truth is that my kids have very rare opportunities. My son was involved in something in Givat Chaviva with the Arabs, but normally my daughters weren't. Have very few opportunities. It used to be that schools, as part of their curriculum, went out and met students from other schools. I'm not saying it was a great success and it was anecdotal, but it was a step in the right direction. Now we have people in government thinking social segregation is actually a virtue, especially, heaven forbid, that some romance develops. And that is something we need to fight. There has to be more normalcy. I don't have a good answer exactly where it is and where it isn't, but there have to be more opportunities for things to happen organically and naturally, and that we don't have.
I have my Neil, my youngest daughter, is studying at Yad B'Yad school, the bilingual school in Kfar Saba. And the fact that she knows the two languages, the fact that she's studying with Jewish children, she won't have the shock that Carmel and Hala had when they moved to Tel Aviv University. The fact that she can speak about the Shoah and the Nakba at the same time, and she can draw the two flags. So I don't believe in segregation. Sorry.
You're not an advocate for segregation. Alas, we are running out of time. I want to give both of you the opportunity to kind of sum up. Is there anything that you haven't had the chance to say? Is there anything you want to leave our audience with, either for us to think about or for us as a group of largely American Jews, for us to do? How can we keep our eyes open? How can we keep thinking as people of faith, and most of us deeply involved in Jewish life and Jewish community, and a lot of people in the process of becoming rabbis and Jewish leaders? and a couple cantors in the room as well. What do you want to leave us with?
Fight Trump. But I want to say why I say this seriously in this context. Because I think that a lot of this has to do with culture. And what is happening throughout the world is not new here. But what's happening here is emboldening the wrong people. Is the growth of a culture of hatred and a culture of supremacy, whoever you are, but you have to be superior to the other. A business culture of everything is a sum-zero game, and my gain is the other's loss and vice versa. And a culture in which everything can be solved by threatening and using force. That didn't start in Israel last month or on Inauguration Day. And it's not, again, unique to Israel, it's happening everywhere. But in that sense, Israel has its unique problems, and we're so grateful that people like you are part of this struggle. And Nasreen mentioned earlier that if we could just make some American Jewish religious people replace some of those we have back home, maybe things would be a little better. But I think it's also a global effort to promote culture. You spoke about faith, of compassion, and of believing all people were created b'tselem, and looking at needs of others. And in that sense, these are all the same struggles, and this one here has huge impact on what's happening back home.
So we have a lot in common. The Arab minority in Israel is a large minority. The Jewish minority in the state is a large minority. And I believe that we have a common values, we have common challenges. And the way that I want to believe that the way that I will do anything to make Jewish feel safe and to fight anti-Semitism after October 7 and the war in Gaza, I want to believe that the people sitting here in this room will do anything that I will feel safe within my homeland. Because if you want to measure the democracy of Israel, you can measure it by the way that the state of Israel is treating the largest minority within it. So I really believe that because we have a lot in common, and because we have a lot of shared challenges, we can support each other. So I hope that we will keep having this kind of conversation, not with my English, but we have a lot of good people that can translate אני ממש מצטערת, אני אשמח אם תוכלי בכל זאת לתרגם אותי. הערכים המשותפים והאתגרים המשותפים שיש לשני העמים, והעובדה בעצם שכולנו יכולים לתמוך אחד בשנייה, כדי שכולנו נרגיש הרבה יותר בטוחים במולדת המשותפת שלנו.
So we can be partners, and part of being partners is supporting each other, and supporting each other so we can each feel safe in our homes. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I want to thank Roy and Nasreen so much for spending so much time teaching us far away from home. For Nasreen, who, by the way, has been correcting my Hebrew today, and your English is amazing, and went away from her family in the middle of celebrating Eid because she felt it was so important to be here and be part of this conversation. And we are now going to have a break. Rabbi Tucker's going to give us some instructions.
Yeah, not too much in way of instruction. There is a break now until 4 o'clock for those who might be interested in Mincha. It will happen at 3:15 in the second floor Seminary Synagogue. We convene again at 4 o'clock for actually what, believe it or not, is the final session of this convening. It's been packed, it's been rich, and it's also gone fast. And we're delighted to be sharing it with everyone. We'll see you at 4 o'clock.